I was born and raised in Brooklyn and lived there most of my early life. And I thought about the world events that impacted me and made all the made me who I was, and because of, so the ones that I tried to identify are, and I'll read them to you, okay, because I wasn't sure I could remember them. The Great Depression. I was born in 1926. Right into the Depression, and my kid brother was born, 3 years later, and I grew up as a teenager in the Depression, and I didn't know that we were depressed. I didn't know that I had to wear hand-me-downs. I didn't know that we didn't have money for a lot of other things, but the Great Depression had a huge impact. And then came World War II, and that was another huge change in not just my personal environment, but in certainly the world environment. So that was the second big impact. What was the next? The next was the Holocaust. I'm Jewish. The Holocaust impacted me greatly because we had family who my grandfather had kind of rescued, family from Germany, and they came and they lived with us, and so I know firsthand stories. And of course, after the war, I learned all the horrible stories, so I have a lot of information about that. Then, as a young adult, the development of the atom bomb, at times when my friends and I were wanting to have families, wanting to have children, we said, we're going to bring kids into this world. That was the big question that we all had, and so we were all impacted by that. And then the establishment of the State of Israel was a huge impact because we're very Jewish-minded, we're very Zionist. I even had eventually a daughter who went and moved there and raised her family there. So world events shaped me. And so while I have all these wonderful personal stories that I'd love to tell you, little stories that are either funny or cute or not so nice, but these world events were what shaped my life. And that's what made me who I am. But if you were to ask me what is the most important thing that ever happened to me in my life, that's a wonderful question. And the answer is when I met the man I decided I was going to marry. That to me was, because that shaped the rest of my life in very strong ways. And I'll just tell you briefly that little story. This was during the war. It was 1944. There weren't many men around, but I had a friend who had a friend who had a friend who was a rabbinic student. This was in New York City. And so we asked if we were a group of young women who didn't have boyfriends because the boys were all away. So we asked this girlfriend if she knew some boys at this rabbinic school and could they come to a Hanukkah party. So she invited them, and they came to gratefully came to the Hanukkah party. And there was one young man that I talked to briefly and didn't know much about him. Went home and woke up my parents at about 2 o'clock in the morning because we walked. Those were trolley car days, and we walked. Woke up my parents and I said, I met the man I'm going to marry. I was 18 years old. So my parents said, what's his name? I said, I don't know. What do you know about him? I don't know. I don't know anything. But sure, and we didn't have a telephone either because those were difficult times. But somehow, I don't know how magic happens, but magically something happened where he found out how to reach me. He reached me, and the rest, was just glorious history. So it was really wonderful. His name was Milton. He was from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. He was a student studying to be a rabbi. But we were both still undergraduates. He was going to Teachers College at Columbia University. I was going to Brooklyn College, entering my senior year. We had nothing. We had no money, no prospects, we had nothing, but we made it work. I had a kid brother that I had to take care of because my father had a heart attack, and the family situation was kind of difficult. My parents had to go away where my father could be in a little place where he could be outdoors, because in Brooklyn the third story was not what a heart attack person could have managed. So I had to stay and take care of my brother, who was 3 years younger than me, and meanwhile try to manage a romance and try and finish my senior work at Brooklyn College. It was kind of a mad but a beautiful time. I remember it just as being glorious and wonderful and marvelous, because I just went from day to day. That's the way life was then for me. And so we made it happen, and we eventually got married happily and had 3 kids and had 8 grandchildren who live all over the planet. I started out as a reading teacher with first graders, and I ended up in junior college. Every couple of years I'd go to the superintendent and say, "Can you move me up a couple of grades?" And that's what I did for 25 years. So I moved up a couple of grades, and then I ended up volunteering for well over a dozen years, of Russians who had come to this country, and English as a second language in the Stoughton Public Library, that kind of thing. I loved teaching adults, so that was my next and most satisfying career. But I have 2 wonderful daughters, and one daughter lives in Israel. She went to Israel. She and her husband were married, and that was where they wanted to live, because they wanted to live that kind of lifestyle. They didn't like the commercial lifestyle that was true in this country. So they went to Israel and had their 3 kids there. And my other daughter lives in Boston and works here at Orchard Cove, as a matter of fact. So I'm blessed. Unfortunately, my first child, my only son, my first child, died just a year ago. He had a heart attack, and we couldn't find him, and eventually had to call the police to go into his apartment, and they found him on the floor. Tomorrow will be the anniversary of the first year anniversary of his death. It's just been a horrible thing. Yeah, but one of my biggest problems is my identity. Who am I? Nobody knows who I was. Who I was is who I am today. All the stuff that happened to me, and all the people I knew, and all the things that I thought, and all the experiences that I had are gone. Nobody knows, and nobody cares. So it's like I'm a new identity. I'm this vague person who was dropped down into Orchard Cove, into a community that doesn't know who I am, and maybe doesn't even care. They have their own issues too. I've learned that. So here I am, having to recreate myself, which has been the most difficult thing about getting to be who I am, to be a single person, to be a person who needs help with medications and food and laundry and all of that. And they don't know me. I have so much. I feel I have such riches and so much in me. Who wants it? Nobody wants it. They all have their own issues and their own needs. So that's been really the difficult thing for me. I had to reinvent myself by recreating what's important to me. And that's been a real tough time. So that's who I am today, a person who has to really recreate myself to make the best life that I can with what it is I have, not with what I want, not with what I had, but with what I want for today. So I'm grateful for the love that I have from my family. I have a wonderful family. My proudest moments have to do with my family. I was so happy to be pregnant and to have number 1, number 2, number 3. And I think I lived a lot through my kids and through their achievements. They all became really very successful, not monetarily, but successful people in their lives and the relationships that they had and the things that they were doing in their lives. And and I see it even in my grandchildren. I now have 3 great-grandchildren, just had the 3rd one just recently in Israel. And I'm sure that they'll all grow into be like citizens of the world. And that's what they're part of. And I'm so pleased to be about that. That's wonderful. That's really, the Jewishness part is of real concern. How do you maintain your identity with this spectacular faith that's been here for so long and still be a part of the world with its other concerns and needs? So that's a concern that I have about what the future will bring for my grandkids and great-grandkids. I need an atlas because I have kids family who live all over the world. Kids in Israel, in Portugal, and in all over. And they've been all over, so I don't know where they'll eventually settle, but I know that there'll be more movement, and I want to know that. But my memory is a memory of a magical world that I got everything I needed. I got everything that made my life worthwhile. It's interesting how I see it that way, but I didn't see it that way when I was living it, but I see it now.